Imagine being on the verge of missing out on a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, only for an unexpected twist to change everything. That's exactly what happened to Ben E. King, a talented young man whose musical dream was nearly left in the shadows, until something incredible occurred. As you'll soon discover, the story behind Stand By Me, his greatest hit, is more surprising than you might think. Of course, we'll also talk about John Lennon's version, as everything surrounding his take on Stand By Me is truly controversial. Before we begin, here's the video's question. Do you know what Ben E. King did for work before making it big in music? You'll find the answer at the end of the video, along with a great recommendation as always. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Ben E. King, born Benjamin Earl Nelson in 1938 in Henderson, North Carolina, grew up surrounded by music in a home deeply influenced by spiritual and gospel roots. From a young age, his singing talent stood out in his community, and he soon moved to New York in search of new opportunities. That's how he ended up joining a band called the Five Crowns. However, what happened next with this band was completely unexpected. Behind it all is a fascinating story that shaped the fate of Stand By Me. And to fully understand it, we need to talk about the Drifters. Money, honey. Money, honey. The Drifters was one of the most popular groups of the 1950s, but in 1958, the band dissolved. George Treadwell, the group's manager, had a contract that required the Drifters to perform at the Apollo Theater in Harlem. However, since Treadwell no longer had a band, he was in a desperate situation and made a bold move. After an intense search, he came across a band called the Five Crowns. Among its members was Ben E. King, who was just starting his career in the music industry. George Treadwell met with the Five Crowns and proposed the idea of changing their name and becoming the new Drifters. Ben and his bandmates felt like they had won the lottery and of course accepted. With this name change, the manager was able to honor the contract and present the Drifters at the Apollo Theater as required.
This magic moment, while your lips are close to mine.
While this was happening, Ben was experiencing some success with the Drifters, but he wasn't entirely happy. What initially seemed like a dream come true wasn't as great as it appeared. The manager was the one taking all the credit, and on top of that was holding back Ben's creative impulses. After requesting a salary increase and a share of the royalties, he was met with Treadwell's refusal, which led him to leave the group.
I was in there about 2.5 years, very short-lived.
And then you went solo.
Yeah, not by choice. We was on the road as the Drifters with a hit record, so we said we're upset because one of the guys happened to see one of the contracts for that engagement for that night. So he comes to us, he said, do you know how much we're making? So we all got upset about it, and we said, well, when we get back to New York, we're gonna set up a meeting and get this straightened out. We deserve more money. And so they're looking at me saying, you talked. So, okay, what do you want me to say? So they said, just tell them that we're not happy with the salary and whatever. So I did, so I stood up, made my little speech as best I could, and he looks at me, he says, well, you can't speak for the group, you speak for yourself. So I repeated everything over and over again. He said, well, if you're unhappy, you can leave. So now, without turning around at the other guys, right, assuming they're gonna come with me, and someone told me not too long ago, you should never assume. Assuming they were gonna go with me. They didn't. I walked out the door like an idiot.
After leaving the Drifters, Ben E. King decided to revisit some of the songs he had written during his time with the band, one of which was Stand By Me. In the months following his departure, Ben decided to make amends with both the manager and his former bandmates. He reunited with them even though he was no longer part of the band, and proposed the idea of the Drifters recording Stand By Me without him. Once again, the singer was met with the manager's rejection.
Wrote the song with only thing in mind, I'm gonna write another song for the Drifters, because they were still hot, you know what I mean? So I took this song down to the guys. We became friends again. We all met at Lover Patterson's house again. We all apologized, and I said, I got a good song for you. They did the song great, I think, you know? So then the manager of the Drifters said, good song, we don't need it. So I took the song, walked out of the office.
At that moment, Ben E. King realized that his journey with the Drifters had officially come to an end. For a moment, it seemed like his music career was over and that Stand By Me would be forgotten forever. But a stroke of luck changed everything. Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller stepped in to help him launch his solo career. And you might be wondering, who were Lieber and Stoller? Their names might not ring a bell, but you've surely heard some of the hit songs they composed.
Well, I'm evil, so don't you mess around. Can't find a partner, use a wooden chair and rod. Everybody let...
Thus, Lieber and Stoller got to work and decided to help him start his solo career. Benny King's first hit was Spanish Harlem, a ballad that marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life.
There is a rose in the Spanish heart.
After a recording session for Spanish Harlem, King had some extra time in the studio. That's when Lieber and Stoller asked him to show them more songs. Always full of ideas, King sat at the piano and began singing a rough version of Stand By Me. Lieber and Stoller, always on the lookout for new ideas, were captivated. According to Stoller, Ben had the beginning of a melody, and I sat at the piano to work on the harmonies, developing the bass line that would become the song's signature. What started as an improvised piano session quickly turned into a unique piece, blending the rich tradition of gospel with the sophistication of R&B. In that small studio in New York, one of the most legendary melodies in music history was born. Though the song already had its soul, the trio kept working until they crafted the anthem we all know today. Lieber later recalled that moment with these words. Ben was so immersed in his inspiration, in his gospel roots, that what he created in that moment seemed to come straight from the soul. When Stoller added that bass line, it was as if everything clicked. We knew we had something special.
When the night has come and the land is dark.
However, to truly understand the origins of this song, we have to go back many years, even before Benny King was born. In 1905, African-American gospel composer Charles Tindley wrote a hymn titled I'll Overcome Someday, with lyrics about hope and the promise that we would never be alone in the face of adversity. Tindley could never have imagined that his ideas would, decades later, shape one of the most beloved songs of the 20th century. Lyrically, this ancient hymn was one of Ben's key inspirations, but it wasn't the only one. The title itself was inspired by a song called Stand By Me, Father by Sam Cooke.
Sam Cooke was with the Soul Stirrers, a gospel group, and he had a song called, I think it was, Oh Lord, Stand By Me, or something like that. So I just took that section out and started writing my own words, you know.
From the distinctive bass line that opens the song to King's deeply emotional vocal performance, they created a piece that could move both the body and the soul. It was more than just a song, it was a refuge for those seeking comfort and connection. When the song was released in 1961, its impact was immediate. However, what truly made the difference was the universality of its message. Stand By Me wasn't just about the power of friendship, it was also about an unwavering commitment. Its message, clear and profound, offered a promise. I will always be there for you, no matter the darkness.
Stand by me, stand by me.
The words of the final verse, whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me?
Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me?
The story of Stand By Me took an unexpected turn in 1963 when a young Cassius Clay, who would soon be known as Muhammad Ali, recorded his own version.
Stand by me. Oh, stand.
Although it didn't achieve the success of the original, his rendition reflected the song's immediate cultural impact. But the most significant moment came when the song became an anthem of resistance in the 1960s. Amid the growing civil rights protests and the fight for racial equality, Stand By Me became one of the defining soundtracks of the era. It echoed through the streets, at rallies, and during protests, turning into a cry of solidarity. However, the story of Stand By Me didn't end in the 60s. In the following decade, a completely different version of the song emerged on the scene.
When the night has come.
It was 1974, a tumultuous period in the life of one of the most famous men on the planet. A man whose career had reached the heights of success, yet whose personal life was crumbling like a house of cards. John Lennon, the Beatle, was in the midst of what he would later call the lost weekend. The glory days with the Beatles were long gone, and his life was now marked by self-destruction, sex, drugs, and a reckless lifestyle that pushed every limit. How had a man who changed the course of music history fallen into such an emotional abyss? His marriage to Yoko Ono was on the verge of collapse. While Lennon was recording Mind Games in 1973, his relationship with Yoko was breaking beyond repair. Public fights, drug use, and growing mutual indifference had drained whatever was left of their love. Chaos, hard drugs, alcohol, and a complete loss of control, nothing seemed to stop Lennon's downward spiral. But in the midst of this disaster, someone appeared. May Pang. Yoko's assistant, young, quiet, efficient. Somehow, she became the spark that reignited something in Lennon's life. In her confusion, Yoko let him go. But what else was Lennon searching for in those days of emotional turmoil? John and May moved to Los Angeles. Lennon found in her not just a companion, but an emotional refuge. Amid the chaos, he seemed to have found a reason to keep going. Passion had returned to his life, but so had his self-destructive tendencies. With Harry Nilsson, Keith Moon, and other companions of excess, the parties became legendary. This was a period that left a lasting mark on rock history and on Lennon's life. Endless nights, club brawls, wrecking houses, and becoming the center of a whirlwind of scandals. The Hollywood vampires, as they were called, were constantly making headlines. But it was in the middle of this chaos that Lennon decided to record an album, a tribute to the songs that had shaped him. Instead of working on his own original music, he placed his trust in a legendary name, Phil Spector. And with that, the storm was unleashed. Phil Spector, known for his volatile temperament and musical genius, accepted the offer but set one clear condition. He would have absolute control. And for Lennon, that meant an opportunity to escape, to focus solely on singing without worrying about anything else. The album Rock and Roll was born out of this chaotic collaboration. In a way, it was the culmination of that wild period, a record of cover songs, tracks that evoked the early days of rock. And among those songs, one of the most significant was Stand By Me, a ballad by Benny King.
No, I won't be afraid. No, I won't.
Stand By Me wasn't just another track on the album. For Lennon, it was an emotional refuge. As his life fell apart, Lennon sought solace in music, and Stand By Me was more than just a cover of a classic. It was his cry, his attempt to find some hope, something he felt was missing at that moment. The emotional storm that engulfed his personal life seeped into his recordings, turning the songs into an escape.
Shed a tear just as long as you stand.
Deep down, perhaps Lennon was asking for help. Maybe in those moments of vulnerability, he wished for someone to stand by his side.
And darling, stand by me.
The Lost Weekend came to an end in 1975. The storm gave way to temporary calm when Lennon reunited with Yoko Ono. But the legacy of those 18 months, his relationship with May Pang, and most importantly that deeply personal recording, would remain etched in history. Years later, Lennon would describe that period as one of self-destruction, a free fall in which no one had looked out for him. But through Stand By Me, we see the other side of the story. A lost man desperately searching for a hand to hold, a soul to support him. And in that moment, the only answer he could find was the one the song gave him.
You're in trouble, won't you stand by?
In 1986, Stand By Me experienced an unexpected revival thanks to director Rob Reiner. Inspired by the melody, Reiner decided that the song would become the heart of his film, Stand By Me, based on a short novel by Stephen King. The connection between the 1986 film Stand By Me and the song of the same name lay in the use of the song as the movie's central theme. The lyrics of Stand By Me reflect themes of friendship, loyalty, and mutual support, essential elements of the film's plot, which follows a group of boys embarking on a journey to find the body of a missing child, facing their fears and growing through their bond with one another. The song is used at key moments in the film to emphasize these feelings of unity and solidarity.
Whenever you're in trouble, won't you stand by me? Oh.
Over time, Stand By Me became one of the most covered songs in history.
When the night has come, when the land is so dark, and the moon is the only light we'll see. No, I won't be afraid.
No, I won't be afraid. Just as long
as you stand by me. And darling, darling, stand by me.
In an interview, Benny King recalled his favorite versions. David Ruffin from The Temptations did a great version, but the one that really stuck in my head was John Lennon's. He made it his own, as if it were his song. Now there's a Dominican singer named Prince Royce, his version is brilliant. And then there's Sean Kingston with Beautiful Girls. As a songwriter, I love that people connect with it.
Beautiful girls, they only wanna do you dirt.
Today, Stand By Me remains one of the most beloved anthems of all time. Musicians keep paying tribute to it, and its legacy, both in popular culture and cinema, remains unshakable. Sadly, in 2015, Benny King passed away at the age of 76, leaving behind an eternal legacy. Yet, as the world keeps moving forward, the essence of Stand By Me remains unchanged. Because in the end, no matter how far we go, there will always be someone to remind us that in the darkness, if we stand firm, we are not alone. This has been the story behind Stand By Me by Benny King. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like, shared it, and if you want to see more videos like this, just subscribe. Your support is vital. The answer to the initial question: do you know what Benny King did for a living before making it in music? Before becoming one of the musicians who changed music history, Ben was a kitchen assistant at a small restaurant in New York. That's all for now. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.
Oh, baby,